And Rabbi Weinreb said, that's me. I'm Rabbi Weinreb of Silver Spring, Maryland. So the secretary was like, said, wait a minute. And he, so to speak, turns around. And now, again, Rabbi Weinreb hears him saying to the Rebbe, he says, he's Rabbi Weinreb of Silver Spring, Maryland. And the Rebbe said, so then he should talk to himself. All right, so we are in the middle of the introduction. We finished the longest part of the introduction, where the Alter Rebbe explains very, very systematically why a book can't do it. Every one of us is so different, and we're talking about such intimate matters of spirit that are even more nuanced per person. So how in the world could the Alter Rebbe write a book, a sefer, and that book is going to reach and inspire and bring every single person close to God, when every single person is so different? And then we said, the Rebbe says, but I know you very well. I know you so well. I know you so intimately. I understand you so well. I managed to write each one of you into this book. I managed that in this work, you will find the answers to your questions. All of the answers are there. If you remember, I said last week, the incident that happened with the Alter Rebbe when he went to Shklov, and how he managed with one soul-searching melody to lift up each person to find their own soul energy, to find the answer, so to speak, to their own questions. So possibly that's what's happening in Tanya as well, that the Rebbe is lifting us up through our immersion in these thoughts, that we open up our soul power. And when we open up our soul power, we get the answers to our questions. The details, it's like the window dressing. You know, I can think of someone who never grew a beard, and after he finished learning the entire Tanya, he started growing a beard. And people said, whoa, what happened? Like, he's been in the system, so to speak, for many, many, many years. Now he's growing a beard? And he said, I learned Tanya. Now, nothing in Tanya talks about growing a beard, but Tanya touches your soul. So for him, that translated his mind, his heart, his soul to grow a beard. I remember once I was learning with a girl, a teenager, and her takeaway from that was, okay, I'm not going to, hang around with boys. I'm like, nothing in the time speaking about that either. But when you study, when it opens up your soul, when it opens up your heart, when it opens up your mind, you get the answers to your own questions. You understand because you feel your soul powers, and then things that seem very muddled before, things that seemed murky and unclear, just become very clear and obvious with your soul shining, empowered with the Tanya. Now, we are in the third section of this introductory letter that we said the Alter Rebbe sent as the Tanya was being printed. And the Rebbe is about to tell us how absolutely amazing the Tanya is. Now remember, the Alter Rebbe sent this letter because a number of his followers were like, we don't want a book, we want you. So he is telling them, well, on a pragmatic note, you need a book. And on the spiritual note, you're so fortunate because you're getting the Tanya, like what a book you're getting. It's a famous comment of Reb Lev Yitzchak Berditchev about the Tanya, that he said, wow, look what, as we'll say, the Alter Rebbe did. He took such a great God and put him in such a small book, in these few chapters, so to speak, in these few pages, the Alter Rebbe put God. You study the Tanya, you get him. I need it, and you're really blessed, fortunate, lucky that you're getting it. So looking inside, we're on page Dalet. We're in the second letter that begins Ach Biyodai. Like, remember, I know you guys so well, and that's how I could do this. And we are 8 lines from the top, second word. So the Rebbe here is explaining where did he get the Tanya from? And we said with the Rebbe's tremendous humility, even though he spent 20 years writing the Tanya, he doesn't give himself credit at all. He says, I'm the Malakite. I'm the editor. I just gathered a bunch of great ideas. That's not coming from me at all. So last class we said that he said some of them are from holy works. Some of them are from the letters from Rabbi Nachman of Hardok, who was his peer but older. Like, you have that good friend that can guide you, but as a friend. when he was writing Eretz Yisrael, there's the letter correspondence. And some of them are things that I verbally heard. As we said in the Sharblat, in the opening page of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe ascribes the Soifrim, who he calls the scribes of the Tanya, as the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mezrich, and Rabbi Nachman of Haradok. So some I heard directly, some are through writings, some are through letters, but all of this is just like, me, I just pulled it all together for you, so to speak. And what did you get as a result? What am I giving you? What is this enormous gift that God is giving you? The Rebbe says, V'kulam hein tshuvos al she'elos rabos. You know what Tanya is? It's answers to your questions. Now, you could learn Tanya and say, it's Tanya answers to my questions. Tanya is sort of like diagramming the soul and the animal energy and God. But again, yes, in this is the answers to your questions. Because as your soul is opened up more and more to this God light, to this God energy, you get the answers. You actually have the answers to your questions. So all of them, you know what the Alter Rebbe said? I'm writing the answers to your questions. Asher sholim be'etza. Everyone comes to me. Everyone asks for advice. So what did I do? I put it all down in a book. Now we would say, so probably one topic is going to be how to earn more money. Another topic's going to be what to do when you have problems with your spouse or children. Or no, the Tanya doesn't say this is how you get more money, and this is how you deal with your children, this is how you deal with your spouse, and this is how you deal with your in-laws, and this is Tanya doesn't say any of that. The Tanya illuminates our soul. And when our soul is immersed in the light of the Tanya, we have the answers to our questions. We have the answers to our questions. I'm reminded of a famous story with Lubavitcher Rebbe. The story actually has my father in it, so maybe that's why I especially remember the story. It just sort of spontaneously came to my head now, so hopefully that means someone here should hear it. Rabbi Heshi Weinreb, my family and his family were both living then in Silver Spring, Maryland. He was at that time a psychologist. He later became a full-time professional rabbi and moved to New York, but this time he's a psychologist in Silver Spring, and he's a friend of my father's, and he was having, like, we'd call it a midlife crisis, but as he says, a bit young for a midlife crisis, but okay. And he was speaking to my father, and my father said, I think you should ask the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's a religious person, but he's not a chassid, he's not a follower of the Rebbe, he's not a follower of any Rebbe. Father gave him a phone number, and you could set up an appointment. And those days, you go, this is in probably the late 60s or early 70s, you can get an appointment. So Rabbi Weinreb called, and he felt sort of awkward. He's going to spill out all his problems on the phone to a secretary. So he doesn't introduce himself, and he says he needs an appointment with the Rebbe. And he heard the Rebbe, who was in the room but not on the phone, telling his secretary, Rabbi Chadakov, well, if he's from Silver Spring, Maryland, where he introduced that he was from, he said he's a Yid from Silver Spring, a Yid from Maryland. So the Rebbe said to Rabbi Chadakov to convey, well, if he's a Jew from Silver Spring, Maryland, there's a certain Rabbi Weinreb there. He should go speak to him. Now, Rabbi Weinreb is on the other end of the line overhearing this, and he's like, Rabbi Weinreb, that's me. But he didn't say anything. He waited, and then the secretary comes back, and he gives over the message of the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, you should speak to a Rabbi Weinreb of Silver Spring, Maryland. And Rabbi Weinreb said, that's me. I'm Rabbi Weinreb of Silver Spring, Maryland. So the secretary was like, said, wait a minute. And he, so to speak, turns around. And now, again, Rabbi Weinreb hears him saying to the Rebbe, he says, he's Rabbi Weinreb of Silver Spring, Maryland. And the Rebbe said, so then he should talk to himself. Very, very powerful message. And when Rabbi Weinreb gives this over, he says that sometimes when he has a question, he doesn't know the answer to it. He said first he learned something from the writings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and then he asked himself the answer to his question. Very interesting, because this is parallel to what we're discussing here in the Tanya. We have our questions. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to immerse ourselves in Tanya. And then, through immersing ourselves in Tanya, this will help augment the powers of our soul. This will help uncover and reveal the powers of our soul, and we will have the answers to our question. Sometimes the answers are within, and through Torah, and through the Hasidus, through Chabad Hasidus, through Tanya, through the Rebbe's writings, we have the power to unleash the powers we possess, the powers of our soul. And then we have the answers to our questions. So the Rebbe said, this is what I put in, all the answers to all the questions. Because this was happening nowadays. Everyone from our country, remember we discussed last week that after the passing of the Maggid of Mezrich, his inner circle of disciples divided the area of what we would call White Russia, divided it among the various tzaddikim, great luminaries, each one in their own right, what we call the Chavraya Kedisha, the Holy Society of the Maggid. And we said, but the Alter Rebbe's area grew. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Radishev got driven out of town. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Haradok went to Eretz Yisrael. So all the people in our area, they keep coming to me. They keep asking me questions. Each one is asking, according to their level, Lashis Eitzos Benafsham, to give counsel to their soul, Bavodas Havaya, in service of God. So the Rebbe says, everyone's coming. Everyone's, so to speak, putting in my own words, badgering me. Everyone needs me. Everyone's asking for things. And what does the Rebbe say? Lios ki ein hazman grama oid. You know what? There's no time. There's so many Hasidim. How do I possibly have the time to counsel each one to the depth they need and deserve? How is there time to answer each person individually with all the details that their question warrants? So one problem the Rebbe is saying, like, I know you guys don't want a book, but this is why I had to do it, is there's no time. There's no time to respond to each of you. Baruch Hashem, there's so many and more of you. Ken Yerbu, there should be more and more of you. Well, there's no time. And additionally, the Rebbe says, V'gam hashichacha metzuya. And guess what, guys? You forget. You ask me, and I answer, and then you don't follow through, and maybe you come back and ask me again because you forgot. So guess what? Perfect solution. I put it on paper. So it's time for everyone, and you won't forget. Or if you do, you will reread it. And maybe if you read it enough, you will actually remember. So the Rebbe here, as I said, is giving almost very pragmatic responses. I know you don't want a book, but listen, there's too many of you, and anyway, you forget. So that sounds very plausible. On the other hand, let's counter that with the facts that the Alter Rebbe spent 20 years writing this, that the Alter Rebbe spent 6 weeks contemplating one letter in the Tanya. So if it was merely a time numbers game, he put an awful lot of time to save himself time. And again, you could also think, well, it was an eye to the future. If then, when the Alter Rebbe is the beginning of the Chabad dynasty, he had, Baruch Hashem, too many Hasidim for his time, imagine what happened as it grew and grew. Imagine the times of the Tzemach Tzedek when the whole White Russia basically. Imagine now with the Rebbe when you have a world of Jews. Obviously, the numbers have exponentially grown and grown and grown. That's true. But again, at the same point, the Alter Rebbe invested a lot of time if this was about saving time. It's more than about saving time. And I saw a letter of the Rebbe where the Rebbe speaks about the concept of putting such ideas in writing as versus saying it orally. Of course, imagine each one of us, our fantasy, I'm sure a joint fantasy of many of us, going into the Rebbe, having a private audience, pouring out your questions. The Rebbe responds to each one. Yes, amazing. It is. But the Rebbe writes that there's an advantage to that which is written. Advantage to a book, like the Tanya, or for that matter, we have, of course, the writings of the Rebbe, the letters, the correspondence of the Rebbe, written. The Rebbe says very practically from a Hasidic perspective, if something is written, it's impacting the physical world far more than if it's verbal. We always think along these lines in terms of our service of God. That on one hand, thought is much more intimate than speech, and speech is more intimate than action. So it has a deeper impact on the soul. But on the other hand, the more physical it is, the more whole body experience it is, the more it's affecting the physical world. So that same concept applied to this situation. If the Alter Rebbe is giving over to his follower an advice, a counsel, an answer. That's very powerful. But if it's put in writing, it's actually more powerful because now it's invested in the physical world to a greater extent, and therefore it can impact the physical world far more. So when we're looking at the Tanya, which is what we're looking at, and we understand that the Alter Rebbe took all of these lofty concepts and made it physical enough to be in, as we've discussed, a printed work, this is really an investment in the physical world, and therefore there's a commensurate power to impact the physical world, which could never be attained if it was a oral exchange. We want the oral. We appreciate the oral. It feels much more personalized. It's touching our heart more. But in terms of the practical impact, there's something that can only be gained if it's actually written. And how much more so, like the Tanya, if it gets printed. So now the Rebbe is saying what I'm calling, so to speak, the punchline. Now, I mean, the letter keeps going. But to me, the next lines we read are so precious to me. Because the Rebbe here is being very honest and open about the power he put into the Tanya. And I say that's precious to me because I almost feel it's like, I'm calling it making yourself vulnerable. I don't know if that's exactly the appropriate way to say it. But the Alter Rebbe is talking about what he just wrote. Now, of course, he didn't write it. He's the editor. He's a compiler. That's how he could say these things. You want to be able to say them probably if he acknowledged he was the author. But still, at the end of the day, like he sort of had something to do with this. So it's going out on a limb to confess, to tell people the enormous power that's in this work that he just spent 20 years writing. But he shares it with us because we need to know, again, especially the resistant followers, the resistant Hasidim of his time, but also for ourselves. We could think, oh, this is deep stuff. I'm not so deep. This is theological stuff. I'm not so theological. This is mystical stuff. I'm not so mystical. This is spiritual stuff. I'm not so spiritual. That's what I was saying. Understand what I'm giving you. Understand what you're going to get from it. And again, it might not be linear. Like I said, the Alter Rebbe doesn't write in Tanya to grow a beard. The Alter Rebbe doesn't write in Tanya not to talk to boys. But this is the road, and then you're going to get what you need, how you're digesting and translating this to the vernacular of your existence. So the Rebbe writes, Al kain, therefore, Rashamti kol hatshuvos. I wrote all the answers. Al kol hashailos, on all the questions that there are. Limishmeres, to be guarded, la'ois, as a sign. Lios l'kol echad ve'echad l'zikaron be'enov, that each person should have as like a constant reminder in front of his eyes. You're not going to have to push anymore to come get to a private audience with me. Why not? Ki bahem yimtza margoa lenafsho. Because in these words you'll find the calmness for your soul. You'll find the tranquility for your soul. The eitzah nechaina, and the correct advice, l'kol davar hakasha elav b'avodas Hashem. For everything that is difficult for you in serving God, everything, l'kol davar hakasha elav b'avodas Hashem. In the Tanya, you will find the advice. Your advice will be different than my advice because we have different challenges. Each one of us will find the advice, find the counsel, find the answers for everything difficult for us in serving God. And the heart of each one of us will be steadfast, trusting in God who completes everything for us. So the Rebbe here is saying, now again, if I said things like this, I might exaggerate a little. I might get a little excited and a little dramatic. This is not excited, dramatic. This is thought out words written by the Alter Rebbe, who's not exaggerating. He's saying the facts. These are the facts of Tanya. The facts of Tanya are, I wrote in every answer to every question you will ever have. I wrote in the counsel you need to give peace to your soul. I wrote in all the advice that your soul will be confident and steadfast and ready to serve God. You say, how could the Alter Rebbe write this? Again, we live 21st century, not in the 1700s. We live in America, not in Russia. We speak a different language. We have a different culture. We have different socioeconomic issues. The world is constantly changing. The challenges we have now probably didn't exist in the world 40 years ago. How the Alter Rebbe managed 200 plus years ago to write in all the answers to my issues. I mean, there wasn't social media in those days, like take away social media, we've solved so many issues. It wasn't there. But again, this is the point. In this Tanya is the spiritual energy that when your soul absorbs this energy, you will have all the answers to all your questions. You will find the answers. You will intuit the answers. The answers will be within you as you're absorbing what the Alter Rebbe invested and implanted in the Tanya. Anyone here have experienced this? Obviously some people here have been learning Tanya for years and some people for less. But can anyone connect to this? And I won't ask necessarily to share how, because it might be personal, but that through studying Tanya, they just resolve things in their mind and in their heart, things that were bothering them, and that just stopped bothering them, and it got resolved, or they understood, or they had the answers to their questions, so to speak, as they studied more of the Tanya.
I actually have a question about this.
Sure. I'm not forgetting mine, so everyone in the meanwhile could be thinking. Yeah.
Wait, yeah, that's good. Good. I'm glad you said that. Hashem told Moshe to make himself judges and consultants so that he wouldn't be very tired in doing all those duties. And so that's the first point. The second point, there is such an emphasis on the oral law in Judaism. So 3, why didn't the Alter Rebbe appoint deputies or other people who were well versed in Torah to off some of those duties of his, as Moshe was commanded to do? And then why this heavy emphasis on the written Tanya when there's commensurate emphasis on the oral Torah and oral laws? So that seems like it's not consistent.
Great questions. Okay, I'll take it one at a time as you asked it one at a time. So your first question was, why didn't the Alter Rebbe appoint deputies? He did. He actually did. He had 2 brothers that were in charge. He divided their jobs among the Hasidim, and his son, who was his successor after him, was in charge of the order and, like as you're saying, deputy jobs for the younger Hasidim, for the younger men. So he did delegate. The Alter Rebbe was he was a general. He was fighting a battle for God. He was a general, and he definitely had deputies, and he definitely knew how to delegate, and he definitely demanded very strong order. Everything was very, very organized by him. As is said, a chassid is a mesudar. A chassid, someone who's following in the ways of the Alter Rebbe, has order in his life. And the Alter Rebbe demanded that order from his followers. Like, for example, you couldn't just impromptu say, oh, I'm inspired, let me go visit the Rebbe. No, you had a time. And if that was your time when you were allowed to come, and if you wanted to come a different time, you had to give a good reason, not to the Alter Rebbe, to one of these, as you're calling them, deputies, who then had to decide if you would get this appointment instead of your regularly scheduled one. So there definitely was delegation, there definitely was deputies, but the concept of yechidus, which means a private audience with the Rebbe, that's not something you could delegate. Yechidus is not like, what's the law? Nowadays I send my questions online, ask the Rav, or you call a rabbi, or you send an email, you ask, you open up a book. That's not what it means when people went for a private audience with a Rebbe. It's a soul concept. Yechidus, which means private audience, relates to the idea of Yechida, the highest level of our soul. So it's a soul-to-soul connection between the Rebbe and his follower, which we call a chassid. So that's not something you could delegate. That's not something someone else can do for you. Someone else could teach them law or scriptures or Talmud, but someone else can't connect and relieve what's on their soul. For that, you need the Rebbe. In terms of your second question, which was also an excellent question, why are we focusing on the superiority of something written when we know the oral Torah was oral for a long, long time, right? The oral Torah was given at the same time the written Torah was given in the year 2448. It first was codified. I'm going to give you a very good guesstimate now, between 13 to 1400 years later. So for sure over 1300 years, close to 1400 years in my guesstimation, thinking of a few historical benchmarks, it was completely oral. And there was an advantage to that. What was the advantage? The exact same concept as the reason why the Alter Rebbe, as we explained a few classes ago, did not want his work printed. He gave it over orally, not in writing. The followers, the disciples, wrote it down by hand, and then the handwritten manuscripts were copied and spread and copied and spread. You could say, well, if he's really looking for time efficiency, he should have just written the whole thing down and printed it. Why didn't he do that? As I'm trying to explain, efficiency is not the only issue here. He did it this way because it's so holy, it's so God energy, it's like a little much to make it so physical. So similarly with the oral Torah. The oral Torah was an aspect of Torah that was supposed to be transmitted orally. It was mental, you studied it, and it was oral. You transmitted it to the next person and the next generation by words, by speech. But after some, between 13 to 1400 years, roughly, it didn't work anymore. We couldn't do it anymore. And the leader of the Jews at that time, Judah the prince, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, said, he said a verse. At this moment, we have to write it, because if we don't write it, it's going to be lost. So again, that seems like a downer. All right, we have no choice. It's going to be lost. We have no choice. So we write it. Oh, oi. But exactly the same logic I'm saying here applies to the oral Torah as well. There's an advantage that it was written down. We have the Mishnah. We have the Gemara. Mishnah and Gemara together becomes Talmud. Then we have all the writings of the Rishonim. Then we have all the writings of the Achrayim. We have a wealth, much more than any one human could hold in his brain, we have on our bookshelves, that we can refer to them, study them, and impact the physical more because they are written. So it's actually a very parallel journey. Anyone else? Any other questions? So I'm going to go back to my question. If someone who studied the Tanya, as many of you have, has seen answers to your questions, things change and shift in your mind and in your heart and in your soul as you study the Tanya.
Rebbetzin, I like what you said about the soul absorbs when you learn Tanya, and I think like 2 weeks ago I mentioned when we were talking about work, and I mentioned that when I learned Tanya, so yes, I had to work, but even if you don't work, and now today I understand it better, because then the soul absorbs it and it changes you from within. So the struggles that I had 2 years ago or 3 years ago before I started studying with you are no more struggles. I mean, every once in a while the Yetzer Hara wants to come and grab me somewhere, but it definitely changed me, So I like what you said, that the neshama absorbs what we learn.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Anyone else? Anyone else want to add on what Rachel said? Well, Hadass chatted it. You read in the chat. how she has definitely seen how she's changed and taken on things, grown in different ways through the Tanya. Anyone else?
I can add, it's hard for me to say if it's particular Tanya, but definitely through your classes. So it's Hasidus. I found answers to my questions through your classes. So I'm sure some of it from Tanya and maybe some from other work of Hasidus, but I definitely have answers.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So glad you could see it so clearly, because I'm sure we all have. Some of us merit to see it clearly. Hadass is sharing actually specific concepts in Tanya that she knew made a big difference and impact, like the hidden good in the shadows, different concepts that really, she said, clarified for her, helped her. Topics on depression, sadness, joy. Anyone else? I'll say for myself, it's very clear for me because I started learning Tanya. I was in seminary. Seminary is a year after high school, so I'm going to guess I was about 18. I grew up in a Chabad Lubavitch home, but I never studied Tanya until then. And I remember very clearly, I felt like a light bulb went on inside of me. I felt like a switch, like God became so real. I can't think of another way to express it. I just felt like, wow, I was religious my whole life and I wasn't a rebel, but he was so real. As I just began, I remember it was the very beginning of my study of Tanya, and like, wow, he's so real. And the soul is so real. And the service is so real. And everything had a lot of like excitement and meaning and import that I never saw before. And it was very linear. It was very clear to me that it was Tanya, and like, wow, the light went on. God is so real, and our service is so, so powerful and exciting. So for some people, it's more obvious. For some people, it might be a little more subtle. Some people might not realize, and then like, oh yeah, I used to think differently. Oh yeah, I used to be bothered by that. Oh, right. It changed. But the power is there for all of us, as the Rebbe is saying. He answered all of our questions, all of the answers to all of the questions, and for each one, what we need to answer our questions. Okay, anyone else want to chime in? Das is sharing the chapters 41, 32 that really affected her. So she's getting case specific. I remember the global overarching effect. Anyone else? Okay, so we will continue. So the Rebbe just convinced us. He shared with us. He was honest and told us the power he invested in the Tanya. So it's like, wow. But how do I understand it? I mean, it's this deep work, right? Must be. You'd have all the answers to all the questions for every single Jew in the entire world forever. Like, wow, that's a lot of light he put in that book. I won't get it. What do I do? So the Rebbe goes on to say, Umisha dato kitsara, and someone whose mind is too small. Lahavin dvar eitz mitoch kontresim elu, to understand the advice written within these, the Rebbe calls it pamphlets, because as this is being printed, it's so to speak in pamphlet form until it's a book. Yeah, it's great, brilliant stuff. I don't understand it. What should you do? Speak to people. Speak to the elders of your community. Turn to them, that they should guide you, that they should help you understand. Speaking was asked before about this idea of a deputy system, besides the deputies at the base, for the Alter Rebbe and Liadi, but in each community, there's also a delegation. There's also a system. There's also a hierarchy of people that know more, that have the responsibility to teach and mentor the ones that know less. This was also a demand of the Alter Rebbe, part of the system. I said the Alter Rebbe was the general, totally a general, and very systematic, very organized. And every community had this organization. Every community had these people that you're the elders. You're the ones with more knowledge and more wisdom and more experience. And you have a responsibility to guide the next generation, the youngers, the people that don't have the same knowledge or background. V'heim yivonanuhu, and they should give you understanding. So the Rebbe is telling you, this person who doesn't have the wisdom, doesn't have the scholarly learning, I'm not going to understand it. The Rebbe says that's very possible. Go to someone who can instruct you. Go to the elders of your community. Go to the mentors of your community. We speak of a mashpia. A mashpia figure means someone who's a spiritual guide. Go to those spiritual guides in your community. And the Rebbe continues, Va'alehem bakashasi, and to those people, to the people that they know who they are, and they're supposed to be the guides of the younger generation, of the people that have less knowledge, less years, less experience. They've less absorbed the, as we call it, the lichluchis, all that's not stated in the books or is stated in the books and they don't understand. To all of them, he says, Shelo lasum yad lapeh. Don't put your hand to your mouth. Like, I don't know. I can't say, right? People are like, me? You're asking me? You think I understand it? You think I can teach you? I barely understand it myself. You know what the Rebbe calls this? Lisnaheg banava v'shiflu shel sheker chas v'shalom. Don't behave with this false modesty, this false lowness, God forbid. The Rebbe says, no. If you're in a position, you got to give. The current Lubavitcher Rebbe says it even more strongly. We're not talking about the elders of a community. The Rebbe says, if you know one letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the first letter, which is Aleph, like the A, you have a responsibility. Go teach that Aleph. Go teach that first letter, like the A, to someone who doesn't know that. Oh, you know an A and a B? You know an Aleph and a Bays? Great. Teach that too. I've seen so many people that the Rebbe's advised to teach, to give. And you're like, them? Like, what do they know already? They know more than the person that doesn't. Every one of us. So we see this starting right here in the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe is saying, don't be false modest. It's not a good trait. Oh, I don't know. No, if you're in a situation, you have a responsibility. Turn to God. He should help you. He should help that you'll say the right things. And as I'm saying, I think this is relevant until today, that every one of us, however little you might think you know, there are definitely people who know less than you. Every one of us knows a lot. We know so much. Some people know even more than that, but we all know a lot. And we all have people that know far less. And when we're ever in a situation, we shouldn't let this sense of, oh, I'm being humble creep in. The Rebbe says it's sheker. It's a lie. It's not humility. Humility is a very godly virtue. This isn't coming from a godly place. This is denying someone else knowledge. That's like denying them food and water. Share it. Don't deny the resources. As is known, the tremendous punishment for withholding sustenance. If someone's hungry and you have food and you don't give that food, you don't share that food, it's a very serious offense. So that's like a warning. The Rebbe is going to go from both sides. Here's the warning if you don't, and here's the sweetness and blessings if you do. As we're going to see later in this letter, the exact same style. So do you know how bad it is to withhold food? This is food. Torah is the only food for our soul. We'll learn this later in Tanya in chapter 5. The only food for the soul is Torah. This person needs food and you're not giving him? That's really, really serious issue. And conversely, Goydel Haschar, and the tremendous reward for sharing the goods, for teaching even if you think you don't know too much yourself. Mimaima Razal, from the saying of our sages, Al Pasuk, Meir Eine Shnehem Hashem. God will illuminate both of their eyes. Meaning, if you are not interested, maybe don't feel you're so capable, maybe don't want to take the time, maybe think, this person, what's the point? They're going to understand. They're not going to understand anyway. I can't be bothered. The Rebbe says, don't withhold their food, and God is going to give you such blessings. What blessing is the Rebbe saying God's going to give you? By you sharing your knowledge with somebody else, God will illuminate your eyes with this knowledge. Meaning, let's say someone comes and asks for an explanation on chapter 1 of Tanya. And this person is like, oh my gosh, I've already taught chapter 1 of Tanya 10 times, Okay, I got to do what the Alter Rebbe wants from me. Let's teach it one more time and with excitement and with energy like it's my first time. Let me illuminate his eyes. If you're illuminating his eyes, God, measure for measure, will illuminate your eyes. So as you teach this information, you will understand it in a way you never understood it before. You're illuminating someone else's eyes. God will illuminate your eyes. That's the tremendous blessing you will find when you share this wealth with others. Ki ya'ir havaya panav alehem, because God will shine his panav, his countenance, face. Hasidus always explains that when we use the word face, we mean the inner dimension. Panim in Hebrew is etymologically like the word pnim, which means the inner dimension. So God will shine his face, God will shine his inner dimension on both of you. Or Pnei Melech Chaim, the light of the face, the inner reality of the living king. The living king, life. Because that's what Torah gives us. Torah is our life. And this most deep part of Torah, Chassidus, this fifth dimension, there's Pshat, the Remez, the Jerush, the Soid, the literal, the allegorical, the Midrash, the esoteric, Kabbalistic, and then there's this fifth dimension, Chassidus. And this is the deepest, most inner dimension, and therefore, more than any part of Torah, but all Torah does this, it gives you life. It enlivens you. When we speak of the resurrection of the dead, right? There's the dew that will resurrect the dead. What is that dew? That dew is Torah, the inner dimension of Torah, because Torah is life, and the inner dimension is the deepest life. That's Tal Tchia. That is the dew that will resurrect the dead, because that is the dew of life. So when you and your mentor immerse yourself in Tanya, immerse yourself in Chassidus, you're immersing yourself in life. And therefore, we're referring here as the God of life, the living God. This is giving you life. And therefore, the Rebbe continues and concludes this section of the letter, and the one who gives life, Yaskenu, should give us the merit, V'yachayenu, and should give us the life, Liyamim, for the days, Asher lo yilmadu od ish esrehu goymer, the days when one man doesn't have to teach another, the days of redemption, when we know it, when we will see God and know. Hikulam yedu osiv goymer, because at that time, everyone will know me, God says. Ki mola haaretz de'as havaya v'gomer, because the world will be full of knowledge of God. We will experience it. We will see it. Our whole bodies will experience it. It will be the most natural state of being, awareness of God. Amen. Kehi ratzon. So it should be. So it should be the will. Any questions or thoughts on this? We finished this section and we have one more section of the letter and then we get to start chapter 1. Any questions or thoughts on this?
I think we saw so many miracles in these past 3 weeks that it's already showing itself. Hashem is already letting us, take a glimpse of what His power is and what He can do for us.
Yes, you are absolutely right. We did. It's like someone said to me, it's like standing and watching the splitting of the sea. We want to appreciate it that way. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else? Any questions? Any thoughts? Okay, so we're now up to the last section of this letter, which is very exciting because that means we're very soon starting chapter 1. What do we do in this last section? The last section, the Rebbe explains. Remember, the Hasidim are like, book. So first the Rebbe said, I totally commiserate with you. I'll explain better than you will explain why a book shouldn't work. And then the Rebbe says, but it does. I know you so well. I answered all of your questions. I put every answer to every question you will ever have in this work. Study it. You don't understand? Go to someone who does. And I'm going to get that guy to teach you. Don't worry. I'm going to put a lot of positive and negatives on him. He will teach you. And now the Rebbe concludes by saying, like, and this is why I'm printing it. I know you don't want it. Until now, it didn't seem as intimidating because it wasn't a book. It was these handwritten manuscripts that you enjoyed and appreciated, but didn't feel were a blockage between you and the Rebbe. But now it's getting official. It's getting formal. It's a book. And as we said, and as I just mentioned earlier, responding to the question, the Alter Rebbe himself didn't want to put it in a book. Like the oral Torah, the Alter Rebbe wanted it to stay more oral, more remote from physicality, but he had no choice. Which obviously, everything is directed by God. And obviously, he had no choice. Obviously, God wanted it as a book. So, looking inside, after these pamphlets, remember, it took the Alter Rebbe 3+ years, none, and I'll have to be. I'm trying to remember, it's 3.5 or 4.5 years, one of the two, to orally give over the entire Tanya. And each time he said another chapter or several chapters, it was written down by the people that were there, and then copied and spread and copied and spread and copied and spread. So after these pamphlets, these handwritten documents, these handwritten manuscripts have spread among all the followers of the Rebbe, Ba'atakos Rabbos, many copies, midei sofrim shonim u'meshunim, from different and really different scribes. And what the Rebbe means by that is different scribes just means the various people. You're merited to be by the Rebbe. You heard the next installment of the Tanya. You wrote it down, or the group of you together tried to word for word record it. And then you have to go home. And on your way home, at each stop, someone says, oh, you were by the Rebbe? Can I get the installment? Can I copy it? Okay, I'm leaving in 2 hours. Okay, I'll do it quickly. And quickly copies it and made a few mistakes. And then 10 people copied his version and made a few mistakes. And 10 people copied those versions and made a few mistakes. So from the various scribes, innocent mistakes corrected. There's also the Meshunim, the really different ones, which is alluding to the deliberate errors that were made by those who opposed the Hasidic movement and wanted to sabotage it, so to speak, from within and from without. Both from within, that the followers of the Rebbe will be reading this and being like, what? And from without, that they could use it and show, look how bad this is, or look how crazy this is, or look how wrong this is, or look how antithetical to Judaism this is. Look what's written here. Because they're embedding those errors in the copies they make. They actually, at a certain point, before the Alter Rebbe printed it, 2 followers of the Rebbe actually once were at a certain fair, and they saw a bunch of Tanyas, already in a sort of rough printed version, being sold for very, very cheap. And they understood, these people are the opponents. And they inserted errors and literally ran off a printing press, so to speak. Obviously, they didn't have exactly that. And they're selling it for really cheap because they really want this to spread. And they really want people to both study it and say what the Alter Rebbe is wrong, and for them to be able to use it as proof. Look how off Hasidus is. So with those mistakes coming in, the Rebbe said, I had no choice, and we have to print it. Meaning in the previous section of the letter, the Rebbe was saying, why is there this concept at all? Why did I create the Tanya? Lack of time, you're going to forget. I invested all the answers to all the questions. Now the Rebbe is saying, and why did I have to print it? Here, I'm really being coerced. Coerced by the accidental and most significantly by the deliberate errors to discredit the whole Hasidic movement. Of course, everything is ultimately orchestrated by God. And obviously, though he didn't want to, there's a tremendous practical and spiritual benefit that Baruch Hashem, the Tanya, was printed.